everyone. This is Vipul, and today I'm going to talk about hooks in React. That how you can use hooks in React. What is it all about? And from a developer standpoint, I'm going to go very basic, starting from basic. What are the different type of hooks you can use in React? So just to start with a little bit about myself. My name is Vipul. I have 11 years of experience around Microsoft stack of technologies, in front end technologies as well, including React, React Native, and so on. I'm a C Sharp Corner MVP and also a Delhi chapter lead. These are some of my credentials where you can get connected with me. I'm also the author of one of the book which I have written very recently on SharePoint Framework, and the title says "Getting Started with SharePoint Framework," and it's available on Amazon as well. So directly jumping to the agenda of this particular session, the agenda includes I'm going to tell you about what are hooks. So how can you hook up with React? Just kidding. So how you can use hooks, what are hooks, why you have to use it, where you have to use it, and when you have to use it. And then I'm going to talk specifically about two important hooks. Those you can say these are the basic hooks. One is the state hook using the use state, and the effect hook using the use effect. And then I'm going to, at the end of this complete session, I'm going to talk about some of the rules of the hooks and what are the benefits, along with some demo. So let's get started very quickly. So if I talk about hooks, so first we'll understand what are React hooks. So I'm going to share some information what was there before the hooks was introduced, because let me tell you, the hooks was introduced in the React version 16.8. Before 16.8, there was no hooks. There was concepts like render props, HOCs, that is high order components, and so on. So what was there before hooks? And then I'm going to talk about little about what is there in the hooks now in the current situation, and how can you use a hook in a React application. So basically, to start with, React hooks, they represents, I'll say, a huge step forward towards building a fully functional React application with minimal use of class components. Because it happened because in the previous past that people started and the developers started using classes more as compared to the functional components. They were more concerned about the class components. So managing state and life cycle events with hooks is much easier as compared to the class components, because they require less code, they are more readable, and then doing the same thing with the React class components, they are pretty easy. You can say that hooks are how JavaScript was always meant to be programmed, because JavaScript is just a basic function, rely on the basic function components as compared to the class components. So React hooks basically adds the ability to manage React state at the function level and interface with React lifecycle events in React functional components. And it does it, let me tell you, that it does it very in a very clear, very precise, composable, and in a very declarative way. So if I talk about before hooks, I was talking about before hooks and after hooks. That was just an introduction. So if I talk about before hooks, there were things like render props. There were higher order components, because React does not offer a way to attach, you can say, reusable behavior to a component. So if you have worked with React before for a while, you may be familiar with patterns like render props and high order components, which we say HOC. They try to solve the problems related to state management and lifecycle events. But the problem with these patterns that they require you to restructure, you can say, your components in a React application when you use them, which becomes sometimes very cumbersome, and it's like a hell, and make your code very hard to follow. Because if you look at a typical React application in React Dev Tools, there is something you will find which is called wrapper hell of the components, because it is very much surrounded by providers, consumers, high order components, render props, and other abstractions. So all these problems was solved by React hooks by attaching reusable logic to your components. You have to just redesign and recode your existing components, existing, you can say, the class components into the functional one, and you can use the same state and lifecycle method inside a React functional component. So that was just a brief introduction that what are React hooks and what was there before React hooks, before the React 16.8 version, and what is there now. Now the other question is that when would I use a hook, and in what situation you are going to use a React hook. So I will say, if you write a function component, from a developer standpoint, I'm just telling all these things from a developer standpoint, from the very basic things, that if you write a function, if you write a function component and realize you need to add some state to it, because before 16.8, before the hooks were introduced, it was not allowed to manage the state in a functional component. With this hooks concept in place after the 16.8 version, or you can say with the advent of 16.8 version, you can now add some state to it. Previously you had to convert it to a class, because if you have to convert a function component to a class component, it was very complex, it was very difficult in nature, because you wanted to add some state to it. Now you can use a hook inside the existing function components which you have already developed in your React applications. So moving ahead, what is again hooks at a glance? I'm just continuing that hooks, they are the new addition in React 16.8 version. They let you use state and other React features without writing a class. So again and again, I'm just repeating the same thing, that now you don't have to write a class component in React application. From 16.8 version, which has already been introduced in React long back, now you can use or write function components, because I totally understand, I am also a developer. From a developer standpoint, writing a function, just writing function name and so on, or just declaring a constant as a function, it's pretty simple and straightforward as compared to creating a class, then declaring some constructors, writing the super keyword, and so on and so forth. So that's why React team, or you can say the Facebook team, also realized it, that it's better to be in the market by introducing something called hooks. So that's why the hooks lets you manage the state and the lifecycle inside the React function components. And then they also allow you to reuse the stateful logic without changing your component hierarchy. So by that, what I mean, that if you have already written a React application, let's say for example having multiple class components instead of the function components, so you can reuse that stateful logic in your function components. At the same time, hooks lets you split one component into smaller functions. So by that, what I mean, that if just consider a tree where you have a parent and multiple child, so just like a component hierarchy you are maintaining, so hooks lets you split that component into small functions, so that you can manage the state in those functions based on only what pieces are related, and what all those pieces which are unrelated or not related, you don't need that anymore in your React application. So by using hooks, you can do that as well. Now coming to directly the most important, or you can say the basic hook, which everyone should use and should start using in their React application, is called the use state. Please remember, all the React hooks start with the keyword use, USE. They start with the keyword use. So if I give you some examples, it's like use state, use memo, use reducer, use effect, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the basic hooks. And one more important, use context. I forgot that. So use context, again, just to get the context of the user in a React application. A more important hook has been introduced. But basis today's agenda, I am going to talk about two important hooks, which are very much basic in nature and which you can use in any React application in the function components. So let's talk about this use state hook. So what is a use state? Use state hook it's a hook. As I told you, it's kind of a hook because it's already telling you that it has a keyword use. So use state is a hook that lets you add the React state to function components. So now, as you can see on the screen, there are two code snippets example on the left hand side and on the right hand side. On the left hand side, this is a use state hook, and on the right hand side, you can see the equivalent class examples, which all those who are not using hook as of now in the React application, you must be writing these class examples or class components. So this is just an equivalent class example of the same use state hook, which I have written on the left hand side. So if I talk about the use state hook, so the three important things which we need to know in this particular example, that what does calling use state do? So if you are calling this use state do over here, so what it is doing, what do we pass to use state as an argument? So what you are passing to use state as an argument, whether it's a variable or what is it, we'll be talking about that, and along with the demo as well. And what does use state return? So what is returning it to you? Because if I talk about the equivalent because if I talk about the equivalent class example, so in the class example, you can see that you have to write a constructor. There is a super keyword. Then you have to initialize the state with this dot state, and then finally you have to set the state by using this dot set state keyword. This is a typical React application by using a class component. But here in this particular hook session, we are talking about how to minimize the code to make it more readable, more clear, more composable, and more declarative way. So here is the equivalent of using useState. So here what I'm doing, just importing the React from a React library and using the useState hook. And in the particular app, which is the example here, the component name is example. This is, you can see, the equivalent function component. You see here, there is no class on the left hand side. So as compared to this class component, I'm not writing any class component, because for using hooks, you don't need to write any class. All the state management, life cycle events can be managed inside a function component, and that is the beauty, I will say, of using hooks in React 16.8 from the React 16.8 version. So let's go through this code. So what I'm talking about here is essentially, what does calling useState do? So essentially what it is doing is, it is declaring a state variable, and here you can see the variable is called the count. Our variable is count, but we could call it anything else. For example, let's say any fruit name, mango, banana, anything else. It's up to you. It's a variable name. I have called it as a count. The variable name, I have given it as count. You can call it anything else as well. So you can say this is a way that how use state is preserving some values between the function calls. So I will say that use state is a new way to use the exact same capabilities that your this dot state, which was doing in the class component. This is the same. This is having the same capability by using the use state, because you can see over here, you are initializing the count with 0 in a class component. On the right hand side of the screen, you can see the class component is initializing the count variable with a numeric value 0. The same thing I'm doing with the use state 0, and my variable name remains the same, that is count. So you can say that use state is a new way to use the exactly same capabilities which is given in the class component, which is given by this dot state, which is provided in a class. You can say normally these variables, they get disappear when the function exits from here, but state variables are preserved by React. Now, the other thing is that what do we pass to use state as an argument? What is passed here to use state as an argument? So I will say that the only argument to the use state hook is the initial state. No other argument you need to pass to the use state. Only you can say only the initial state you have to pass to the use state, because unlike with classes, the state does not have to be an object here. You can see the state here is treated as an object, but the state is not treated as an object in the use state. We can keep a number, you can keep a number, or you can say string, if that's all you need. So in this particular example, I just wanted a number, so that's why I kept as a number, because in this example I am showing that how many times the user clicks. It's a counter application which I have developed, so it is telling you that how many times that particular button or that particular counter is clicked. So I'm passing 0 as a initial state for our variable. If you wanted to store two different values in a state, you can call the use state twice as well, so that's not a problem. So now coming to the use state hook again. So three important things related to the use state hook. First, the declaring the state variable. Second is reading the state, and the third is updating the state. These three are the important things which you need to understand about the use state hook. So first, you have to declare a state variable, which I did as a count. Count I use as a variable for the use state. Then you have to read the state, reading a state, and then updating a state. So I have made a very small comparison over here between the class and the function component. And after this, I'm going to show you with a demo as well that what we are talking about. So if I talk about how you declare a state variable. So in a class, you generally do this by this dot state count equal to 0. So this is a way you define a variable or declare a state variable in a class. But if I talk about in a function component, we don't have any concept called this. So there is no keyword in a function component. So like let's say we say dot bind this. So there is no this in a function component. So we can't assign or read this dot state. Instead, we use a use state hook and we pass the count variable or the count value 0 in the use state hook. Now the second comes is reading the state. How can you read a state in a use state hook? So generally in a class component, when we want to display the current count in a class, we read this dot state dot count. So in the previous example, you must have seen that I was using this dot state dot count, and I was incrementing it every time by one when the user will click on that counter. But when it comes to function component, we can use count directly. So I have used the count variable. You can see here, set count, count plus one. I have used the user state variable, that is a count, directly in my set count function. So that's the real beauty, I will say, of using the use state, because it is making your code very much cleaner, very much, you can say, declarative, instead of writing very complex and bigger code inside a class component. And the last but not the least, I want to talk about how you can update the state. So very much interesting. Before hooks, I was also using the class components, but nowadays I am very much fond of the beauty of the React developers, that how they have developed these hooks, and in the long run how it is helping the developers out there. So if I talk about a class component, we need to call the this dot set state. So going back to the previous slide, you see here I'm using this dot state dot count for updating the state, this dot set state. But in a function, we already have a set count method and count as variable, so we don't need this. So you see here in a function component, by using the use state, we already have a predefined method which says set count. So that's all about the use state. I'm just directly jumping to the demo. I just want to show you a very good demo related to the counter which I have developed. So you see here, I am in ID. You can use any ID of your choice. This is a Visual Studio Code. So I have written this a very small React application by using use state hook, where, as I mentioned, that I'm using a variable which is count and initializing it with a value 0. I'm using a set count predefined method which is available in function component, and on the click of a button, you see here on click, I'm just passing it and incrementing it again and again by one. So you see here my node server is up and running, and if I show you the output of this particular thing, so you see on my screen is it is running on the local host on the port number 3000, and whenever I'm clicking it, it is incrementing the value by one, because I've given in the code that I have to increment the value by one. So this is the beauty of hooks. So if I show you in the code, I have written the same code using the class component as well. So you see here, let's say if I comment this particular code, so let me comment this particular code from here. I'm commenting the code for user state, and I'm running the same equivalent of this user state using the class component. So let me uncomment this code and just saving the file. I've just saved the file, and you see here the same code, class app extends constructor and so on. So you see here that this will give me the same output. You see here. So but the problem over here is that you have to write a constructor, you have to write the super and so on. So instead of writing the class components, after this session, I'm assuming that you all will agree with the beauty of the React hooks, and you will start writing the function components as compared to the class components. So that was about the use state hook. Now let me jump over directly to the use effect hook. So I'm jumping to the slide, the presentation. Okay, so now talking about using the effect hook. Now, you must be wondering that what does it mean? What are these effects? Are these related to the look and feel, or they are related to some kind of branding? No, they are not. Let me be clear with it, that we are not talking about anything related to branding or look and feel of the application. The effect hook, it lets you perform the side effects in function components. Ho ho, now side effects. Now, what are the side effects I'm talking about here? Don't take it otherwise. These are not the side effects to your application. These are the effects which you can add to your React application using the use effect hook. So likewise, just like I did in the user state hook, I did in the use effect hook as well. On the left hand side of my screen, you can see I have written a code which is related to the use, which is making the use of use effect hook. And on the right hand side, this is the equivalent class example. So first, let's talk about what is a effect hook. So if I talk about effect hook, the use effect hook of the React, so the data fetching or making setting up a subscription, or you can say manually changing the DOM in React components. All these are examples of the side effects. Let me repeat it for you. What I'm saying is that if you want to set up a subscription kind of thing, or manually change the DOM in a React component, or some kind of data fetching activity or task you want to implement, these are some kind of examples of side effects in a React application. So whether you like it or not, or whether or not you are used to calling these operations as side effects, or maybe you can call them just as effects for your information. These, because side effects could be taken is it in a negative way, in a wrong way, that why, how we are doing a negative effect to our application. No, we are not making any negative effect or any side effects. You can, if you wish, you can call them as effects as well. So you have likely performed them in components before. I'm pretty sure that you must have used the lifecycle methods like component did mount or component did update. Because what happens in a component lifecycle, generally you have to mount, you have to unmount your components, because you have to prevent it from the memory leak as well. So I will talk about these two typical, or you can say common kinds of side effects in a React components, because there are some kind of components which don't require cleanup, and some of them they require the cleanup. So if I talk about the effects without the cleanup, so there are two lifecycle methods which you can see on the screen on the right hand side: the component did mount and component did update. We have used them a lot, or you must have used them a lot in your React application, I'm pretty sure, as a developer, as a front end developer, because it happens sometimes we want to run some additional code, because let's say, for example, the DOM has been uploaded, the DOM has been loaded, and then the DOM has been updated. These two are different kinds of events when it comes to the React life cycle. So if I talk about network request, manual DOM manipulations, logging in into the system, these are the common examples of effects. You can call them side effects, you can call them effects, whatever you want, but these kinds of effects, they don't require a cleanup. So there are some effects which require a cleanup. What I mean to say is that there are some effects in a React application which need a cleanup. In a need a cleanup means that you have to clear the memory leak, you have to clear your component when it is completely mounted, you have to unmount it. But there are some events or effects that don't require a cleanup as well. And we say that because we run them and immediately forget about them, so we don't have to clean up them, right? So if I talk about typically in a React class component, what you do generally in the render method. So render method itself is a, you can say, should not cause side effect. It would be too early for a render method. So that's why in React component we have added, or we have introduced the methods like component did mount, or we have started using it before 16.8 version of React. The events, the lifecycle events like component did mount, component will mount, or component unmount, component did update, and so on. So that's why in React classes we put a side effects into especially two kind of methods. One is the component did mount, and another is component did update. So as you can see on my screen now, this is something very important you need to notice. You must have noticed this thing, and as a developer I will say you must have noticed this thing, that you have to duplicate your code. So while you was using the when you was using the class component, you are duplicating your code here. Oh my god, this is not acceptable at all. Why this is not acceptable? Because you are writing the same code two times in the lifecycle methods in a class. Because in many cases we want to perform the same side effect regardless of whether the component is mounted, or it is updated, or it has been unmounted. So conceptually, if I talk about, we want it to happen every time it renders, but React class components don't have a method like this. So what you have to do, you have to unnecessarily write two methods: component did mount, component did update, even when your application DOM is updating, and you have to write the same code two times. So that's where the use effect hook comes into picture. So if I talk about the equivalent use effect hook, you see on the left hand side of the screen that when you are using the use effect, you have to just write the code one time. So what does use effect do? So by using this kind of hook, you are telling the React that your component needs to do something after render, not the before render. You are telling the React application that your component need to do something after render. So what will happen that React will remember the function you have passed to it. So that's why we refer it to as effect. I'm just repeating again for you that React will remember the function you have passed to it, and we refer to as effect and call it later after performing all the DAM manipulations or DOM updates. So you see here on the left hand side, this use effect will be called after your return or the render internally when it is called render. So when that has been executed, so this use effect hook will be called. So what we are doing over here in this particular effect, we are setting the document title. You see I'm setting the document title, but we could also perform data fetching or call some other imperative APIs over here, because on the right hand side of the screen you can see that when I'm using a class component, so I'm passing the same code twice in two different lifecycle methods. One of them is component did mount and component did update. So it's my humble request to all of you now, as a developer, as a front-end developer, stop using these lifecycle methods, stop using these class components in your React applications, start using hooks. And by after today's session, I'm pretty sure that you will have an idea that what are hooks. If I want to again give you a single or a simple one-line definition of hook, so hook are basically the function components which allows you to manage your state and lifecycle events within the function components itself. So you don't have to write any more the class components and stuff like that. So again, coming back to this example. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay. So again, coming back to this example, I was talking about use effect. Now you see here that use effect is called inside a component. This is very, very important to understand, because if I move before, you see here inside the component we use the use state. Likewise, you have to use the use effect hook inside a component. And why it is important, why is use effect called inside a component, why it is important? So let me tell you that placing use effect inside the component, it allows you to access the count variable. Or see, this count is used here as a prop, right? You can call or you can use any props right from the effect. So by using the use effect inside the class, I'm sorry, the function component, that is example over here you can see on the screen. So you don't have to call any special API to read it. To read it means by to read the count variable, it's already inside the function scope. So when we talk about functions from a developer standpoint, I'm again going a little bit technical over here, that when we talk about a function components, they have variables or the members which have particular local or the global scope I'm talking about. So when you are specifying the use effect hook inside the function component, that is the example in my case over here, you don't have to need or you don't have to call specifically a special API to read it, because it's already in your function. You see here the count variable and the use effect hook is already inside your function component. So I will say that they are leveraging the JavaScript capabilities. They are embarrassing JavaScript closures and avoiding introducing React specific APIs where JavaScript already providing you a solution. So let me tell you a hidden story behind it. What React developers or the React team out there in Facebook might have thought, that if they have to be in the long run as compared to the other frameworks or the front-end frameworks, for example, Vue.js, Meteor.js, Amber.js, or Angular specifically, they have to introduce the concept of hook, because this hook allows you to manage your state and the lifecycle components inside the function itself. So as a JavaScript developer, you are used to writing functions instead of the writing class. So writing function components, I will say, are pretty easy as compared to writing the class components, which are very much complex in nature, because you have to write the many keywords, you have to introduce constructor over there, and so on, so forth. So that is why I say that use effect has a very, very important advantage when it is called inside a function component. Now the question is that the other question could be coming in your mind is, does use effect run on every render? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. By default, it runs both after the first render and after the update. Because you must have understood by this time now that component did mount, component did update. What they are doing? Component did mount means the render method, it is calling inside the render method, and component did update means after the DOM has been updated. So both these things, both these functionalities, because it is running both after the first render and on the subsequent renders, which means that after every update, the use effect hook will be called. Okay. Now, what is the effect with the cleanup? Earlier, now we looked at how to express side effects that don't require any cleanup, but some effects, as I talked about, that they do need a cleanup, because we might want to set up, let's say, for example, a subscription to some external data source. For example, you want to call a chat API, or some kind of a chatting bot or chatting application as a data source, external data source, then definitely you need some effects, or I will say the effect hook, which need cleanup. So now coming to the demo part of this, that how you can use the use effect hook. So let me comment this piece of code over here. I'm commenting this code so that I can show you the demo for the use effect hook in place. Okay, blah blah blah. So okay, so you can see over here that this is a function app, this is a function component. Okay, I'm using a use state, but before this, please remember, yeah, one thing very important to understand, that what you have to import now, you have to import React use state and use effect from the React library, because without this statement, your use effect hook is not going to work. So that is very important to understand. Now if I talk about this particular example, again, this is a counter example, but you see I'm not using any class component, this is a function component where I'm using use effect hook, and I'm just setting the document title, and it is saying you clicked how many times you clicked this. So let's save this file. Let's save this file and see whether our server is running. Okay, my node server is running, and now we can see. So you see here, I'm clicking it, and accordingly, my document title is getting updated. So that's the beauty, that's the interesting part of using the use effect hook. So now you see here, the number of times I am clicking this particular button, click me, it is changing my document title, because in the code, if I talk about the code part over here, in the use effect hook, I'm just setting the document title. So instead of using the lifecycle methods like component did mount, component did unmount, or component did update, I'm just using the use effect hook, which is allowing me to set my document title, and which is saying that you click this button how many number of times. So if I show again over here on the screen, I'm just clicking this button, and you see my counter is increasing by 1 every time, and the document title, or you can say the browser tab title, anything you can say in that sense. So the document title is also getting updated over here, and it is showing me the message, you click this 20 times. So that's the beauty of using the hooks. You can use any ID of your choice. So till here, we talked about the use state hook and the use effect hook. And let me tell you, there are more number of hooks available with the React 16, with the React advent of React 16.8 version. You can use context, use reducer, use memo. These are some other kind of hooks. And let me give you one more additional information. If you are getting a question in your mind that, hey, can I create my own custom hook? The answer is yes. You can create your own custom hook. Now, this is a very good news for us, that can I create my own custom hook? Because see, There are some hooks which are predefined for you, pre-built for you, and definitely 90% of your task will be completed by this. But if you want to create your own custom hook, the answer is yes. And how you can create them? You can create those custom hooks on top of predefined hooks. So that's the beauty of the React hooks. Now, coming to the next topic, and this is the second last topic of my talk today. What are the rules of hook? So, very straightforward. There are only two rules. No big thing. No, you can say very important. It's very much important, but yes, it's not that lengthy that you have to remember it. Only very simple and straightforward rules that you can only call hooks at the top level. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean that you only can call the hooks at the top level? Which means that if I talk about a React component, it is a hierarchy. Now, when I say hierarchy, this is a kind of a parent-child relationship I'm talking about. So at the top, you have a parent, and below it, you have multiple child, which are your subcomponents. So the rule says, the thumb rule is of using hooks, that you don't have to call the hooks inside any loop. Don't call hooks inside any loop, inside any condition, or any nested function. Instead, I will say that always use hooks at the top level of your React function. So if you have a React function or a React component, function component, always use it at the top level. And I will say that by following this rule, if you follow this rule of using the React hooks, you ensure that I will say that hooks are called in the same order each time a component renders. Because let me tell you one thing, that, for example, in your, let's say, React application, in a function component, you have called multiple hooks. So at the first level, you have called useState, then you have called, let's say, useEffect, then you have called useReducer, then you have called useMemo, and so on and so forth. So the specialty of the hooks is that they are called in the same order each time a component order, and in the order in which they are called. That's what allows React to correctly preserve the state of the hooks, you can say, between the multiple use state or use effect calls. That's why we are saying over here that the thumb rule of using hooks, that you need to use the hooks at the top level and not in any of the nested condition or inside the for loops. So that's the rule number one. Now, coming to the rule number two, that you have to call hooks from the React functions. You don't have to call the hooks from regular JavaScript functions. So what does it mean? What is the difference between now here? Don't get confused at what is the difference when we are saying a JavaScript function or a React function. In the simple sense, instead, just call the React from React function components we are talking about. And you can also call the hooks from your custom hooks. So as I told earlier, that the custom hooks are definitely built on top of the basic hooks which React provides. So yes, you can call the hooks from the custom hooks as well. So these are the only two rules. If you explore more about the hooks, you can find on different articles, different blogs, that people will talk about different rules, maybe 4 rules, 5 rules, 7 rules, 8 rules. But those are just, you can say, the part of these two rules only. These are the two thumb rules which needs to be, you can say, followed while working with React hooks. If you follow these rules, I'm pretty sure that you will not face any difficulty, any challenge, or any complexity while using React hooks. Now, coming to the last topic and the final words for this session, what are the benefits of using hooks? So, as I told you, that hooks help us to write a very cleaner and, you can say, more concise code. So as you can see on the screen, it's just like we went on a code diet and we lost a lot of weight and we look better and feel better now. So on the left hand side of the screen, you can see I've pasted a photo, a picture of one of the actors, you can say. And on the right hand side, it is the advanced version, or the cleaner version, or the precise version, because this particular person or man might have taken a diet in his scenario. So just jokes apart, and just kidding in this sense. So using hooks, it's just like we went on a code diet and we lost a lot of weight, and now we look better and feel better. So what is happening, you can see here in this particular picture, it brings out your jawline, makes us feel lighter on your toes. So it's the one change that has worked for us. So just look at the React hooks which have done for others. It has make our life easier. So all kidding aside, hooks cuts down and makes our code more readable, concise, and clear. So just at the end of the session, I just want to say that start using hooks if you have not started yet. Start using with the use state hook, and then you can go on with using the other hooks as well. Just like today, I talked about the use effect hook, and you can get connected with me if you need to have more information. If you need more information about React applications, how to deploy them, how to use from a server side standpoint, how to use them with an external API, with the external how to build chat applications, and so on and so forth.